And once again, we're live with another episode of The Pile of Shame for you. So far, it's just myself, Simon from Mite Size Wargaming, Jay from Man Eye Miniatures, and Anthony, who we can't get rid of no matter how much we try. Only joking, fella. Welcome, all three of you. We may well be joined by some more of the usual suspects as the evening goes on, but here we are on yet another episode of The Pile of Shame. So welcome all of you, and let's see how's your gaming or hobbying weeks been since our last episode 2 weeks ago. Jay, you crack on first, buddy.
Well, I've just been painting away Romanians that I got from Great Escape Games just the other day there, and played a small bolt action game based in North Africa and managed to win.
Excellent.
With Italians.
Good stuff. And the Romanians, the bolt action Romanians, I take it.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. That's
I paint them for them.
Good stuff. How about yourself, Anthony? Your third core project came to a conclusion recently, I understand.
That was I finished the final 3 figures for that, and it completes the project. So I've spent the rest of the week digging out some of my old Walking Dead All Out War miniatures. So I've had quite a few unpainted for a while because I lost all the rules. I refound the rules a couple of weeks ago, and I thought, well, I'm now on a bit of a hiatus from Napoleonics. I'll take the chance to. I'm basically going to paint up a few more of these guys, and then crack on with my Team Yankee project for a little while. But I have got plans, of course, for more Napoleonics in the near future, because I don't think I'll be able to survive without them.
Fair enough. I was just going to say, you pig sick of Napoleonics after having painted an entire core's worth.
Maybe just French line.
Well, yes, I can understand how that might get a little bit repetitive. Now, as for yours truly, Easter Monday just gone here. I was frantically painting some Napoleonics to get ready for a big black powder game. I had at my games club. Basically, it was loosely based on Quatre Bras, but with sort of Hanoverians holding a farm and French coming at them from what felt like all bloody sides. He says, speaking as a chap assigned to be the Hanoverians. So basically, I was busy having my ass handed to me on a plate whilst reinforcements took their time coming in. And it was basically 3 pairs aside. And at one stage, nearly 3,000 models on the table. It was a 20 foot by 6 foot table, and good fun had by all. I have to say, one of the big things about gaming for me in general, wargaming for me, is the visual feast. Like wow, these lovely models I'm chuffed with that I've just painted, or like the visual feast of something like a game like the one I've just described. Brilliant. But in terms of the actual gaming, rolling dice and pushing your models around, I think I prefer a smaller game, just like a one-on-one thing. But gaming aside, the actual visual spectacle and having fun with some gaming friends of mine at our club, and a bit of banter, a bit of chat as well. It was brilliant. Really good fun. So good time had by all.
The first proper game of bolt action I ever had was on a massive D-Day table with about I think it was 12 players playing.
Wow.
And it was quite a good little introduction to it. Such a massive. It was so massive that I think it was basically 3. It was basically the length of. I suppose it might have even been 18 feet, because it was 3 6x4 tables put end to end. The game was basically split into 3 parts because of it. And I was in the middle, and then there was obviously the beach landing going on at the far end, and then further in was all the sort of the paratrooper action and stuff like that. And it was a really good fun introduction to bolt action, which I at that particular time hadn't actually played.
Funny enough, my introduction to bolt action, my introduction to bolt action, because I had years and years ago played the first edition, a couple of squads and we'll show you the basis of the game sort of thing. And good, really enjoyed myself. And then the chap who actually moved away, and I knew nobody else who played anything locally at the time. other than 40k stuff. So I left it lying for a bit. And then my first sort of proper game now and getting back into it fully was last year, a big multiplayer game as well. So you talk about big multiplayer games.
Yeah.
And I felt so I enjoyed it, and there was a great bunch of fellas to have a laugh with and so on. But I think in terms of the actual gaming experience, I think I prefer smaller one-on-one games. But the visual feast and the banter and the chat and the
I mean, it was
club
real good fun.
camaraderie.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, it was quite
each type of thing has something to recommend it. I think
exactly, definitely. I mean, for me, it was quite tiring because of that's basically why I stay at home and solo game. But it was a good introduction to actually to experience it for the first time.
Cool.
And I seem to remember I had a Panzerfaust, and it took out a Cromwell in a single shot.
Well,
which was the highlight for the day.
Well, MVP for me last time I played Bolt Action was a Matilda tank, notably the flamethrower version from my Australian army, and it certainly did quite well. Anyway, we all digress. Today, this is our first show since the Easter break, so we've had a fortnight's break, and we're going to be going fortnightly, not necessarily just on my channel. There'll be other people hosting and taking part and so on, but today's show, with the topic we've got today, is Dark Ages wargaming. Anything about the manufacturers that are available, the scales of models that are available, the rule sets that are available, the type of gaming you can do, the armies you can play, blah blah blah. And we're going to be looking at individual gaming periods over the next few shows, possibly. That's and like I say, this week's is Dark Ages. Now, Anthony, I remember you saying when we were talking about arranging tonight's episode, you said you haven't got a lot of experience, but you do, or you have played Saga quite a bit, which is a reasonably well-known and very popular skirmish gaming set. And I think, for reasons we'll carry on discussing later, it's a period that lends itself well to small-scale narrative-type games. So, how about you talk to us a little about Saga, Anthony, for those that are relatively uninitiated like myself?
I can't really remember exactly what got me onto it, but I remember basically coming across something that just piqued my interest about it. I think it was possibly because it was quite small scale and not particularly expensive at that particular time. So I think I basically ordered the rule book and a 6-point Viking starter army. That was like my first purchase. And obviously, I think in the first version of the rule book that it had Vikings in, did it? I can't remember. It's so long.
In terms of skirmish games of this period, I've only played sort of SPQR, Hail Caesar's little brother. I'm aware of Saga, but I've not.
I'm pretty sure it was actually, because you got the battle boards with the rule book. Yeah. But I think it was that there was 2 expansions that covered things like the Anglo-Saxons and the Irish and stuff. I did end up obviously getting those in the end, but when I first started, it was the 6-point army, and it was a 6-point starter army, and I think it was about £35 or something like that for a 6-point army, which is pretty decent compared to what they are now. Literally as soon as I got it, I kind of almost sort of felt, obviously, I mean, I'm always kind of a solo gamer, so I was, while reading through the rules and stuff, I was thinking, well, how can I get this to work playing solo? Worked out a way of doing it, and then painted up my warband, and then I started collecting a second warband, which I think it was Anglo-Saxons, second warband. And those guys are actually built up mostly out of plastics. I think I got the 4-point starter set, and then the rest were built up out of the Dark Age and the Thanes box sets.
For the uninitiated that haven't played it, when you say 6 point, whatever, roughly how many models does that equate to?
Well, they say that 6 points is a good sort of starter. I mean, I think that now it's kind of being brought more or less down to 4s, isn't it? But so basically, you're talking about let's see. I think in the starter set you get your warlord. He's always free, so every army will have a warlord. Sure. And then all the other units are basically 1 point each. So I think you got 2 units of Hearthguard, which are 4 men each. 1 unit of Levy, which is 12 man, and they're basically archers. and then 2 units of warriors, which are 8 men.
Ah, fair enough.
So
That's okay, I
it's
suppose.
kind of, I suppose you could say it's a little bit bigger than a starter army, because they say a good starting point is 4 to 6 points. So yeah, I suppose it's the sort of the middle section of that sort of scale. And I also, strangely enough, not all the armies had 6-point starter sets. Most of them were like 4-point. So I don't know particularly why I decided to choose to go for the 6-point rather than the 4-point, but that kind of became my norm then. So I was kind of just building up every army for 6 points, and then I kind of decided to go bigger, because there was a section at the end of the first rule book that allowed you to basically double your points. So you could play like 11, 12-point games, and that's what I ended up doing. So all my Saga armies are all a minimum of about 12 points.
Fair enough. How about yourself, Jay? Have you done much gaming with the Dark Ages? We'll talk about gaming and our individual experiences of the period first, and then we can start to talk about other aspects of it all. So how about yourself, Jay? You done much gaming in this particular period?
Not really any gaming at all, but I know people at my club have, and they've got loads of stuff that they will use for it. I really haven't painted anything that could be used except for my Irish Galaglass, which are Scottish mercenaries, which could be used in Dark Ages because they have the attire of it, and they've been on the go since then. But that's all I've really done with it. Just Irish Galaglass, which is all.
Well, why not? Now, for myself, I've I've had a couple of games of SVQR, but I'm mostly like a bigger gaming sort of person. But it strikes me that's almost a bit daft on my part, not because there's nothing wrong with playing bigger games and so on and so forth, but it is as a period something that can really lend itself well to small narrative, skirmish games and so on, simply because of the nature of the beast. I mean, how many TV shows are like take The Last Kingdom or Vikings, for example? You can recreate a raid by Uhtred and his mates as they're going charging off doing something in Viking times, or how many films are based on like well, Robin Hood, for example, Normans and Saxons and things like that. You can go doing bits and pieces along those lines and so on. It's, as a period, in terms of fiction, set in the period and so on, and well-known stories, there's certainly plenty of inspiration out there, and I think it does lend itself well to smaller games. So the big contenders then, SBQR and Saga. So if anybody out there in the chat either now or that is watching later, I'll type a question in the chat as well, so that people that join subsequent later and can see it. But I mean, is there do either of you two know any other sort of smaller skirmish type gaming rules for the period that because like I said, it
not
is
really
a period
skirmishing. I mean, obviously there's the Hell Caesar, which is something that although I've never actually played it, I am sort of quite interested in it. But the other sort of side of my Dark Age type thing, although I suppose it could be a little bit later than Dark Age because it involves like Romans and stuff, was that I picked up a game called Onus. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's basically, I think originally it was a Spanish game, and they kickstarted like a second edition that included like English rules and an English version. And it's basically, I suppose it kind of counts as an in between a sort of a skirmish game and sort of Hell Caesar, because it's basically like a miniatures game, but your units are on cards. So you basically, say you had like a unit of I don't know, Triarii, with Pilums. There'd basically be like 12 Romans looking top down, 12 Romans on the card, the stats at the back, and you basically you have your range ruler and you move your troops just as if you're moving blocks of miniatures, but they're actually on card. Now I would actually show you, but it's actually in the other room. The only elements of it I've got in here is actually just the terrain and the fortress set, which is basically, obviously, like it says in the box, terrains and siege rules and stuff.
All right, okay.
But let's see, I've got what's this? Oh, I've got the art book here, actually. I can kind of show you the rough sort of idea of what the cards look like, or at least the artwork for it. But it's actually a really good little game. There's like an example.
Oh yes, I see.
Kind of what the units look like on the card, and I think if I move it that way, that's what the cards look like.
Yeah, fair enough. That's sort of straying a little from Dark Ages there, but I get the idea. It's certainly an interesting.
Yeah, a little bit later than Dark Ages, but that's
Earlier,
that's
you mean?
talking about sort of in between the sort of because obviously Saga kind of covers that period too, doesn't it?
Somebody just said in the chat, Veland Schmieder in the chat has just said Lion Rampant can be used in the Dark Ages, which is a very good point indeed. Actually, it's also it's something that's often associated with the Baron's War, early medieval, which obviously lines blur with Dark Ages and that early medieval Crusades, Norman type era, and that's a gaming system that certainly is very, very popular. I know a lot of people that speak very highly of it. I don't know if either of you two have got any experience of playing it.
I haven't actually played it myself, but I have watched a few battle reports. And I don't know. I mean, perhaps it's because I need to watch a few more, but it didn't seem to light a spark in me. I've got to admit.
Fair enough.
I
suppose you've got to have. I mean, any interest in any period and any level of gaming has got to be sparked by
that's right,
some form of interest, whether
exactly. I mean, I wouldn't say that I hate it to the point where I would never play it. If somebody said, "Well, why don't we have a game?" that'd be fine. Because I'm sure you can't really judge a system until you've played it yourself, can you? Really?
No. I mean, my personal preference is for I'm quite happy to sacrifice realism for a fun game that flows well, because at the end of the day they're toy soldiers and you're rolling dice on a table with your mates. It's not fucking the world is going to come to an end because I haven't painted the right piping color around a freaking cuff on a French dragoon, or it's the ground scale doesn't equate with how far a musket would have actually fired, or something like that. I'm quite happy to sacrifice that for the sake of assimilation to a varying degree of realism for a game. And but alongside that sort of preference for that sort of rule set, whether that is your cup of tea or not, there's obviously got to come an interest in the period. Now, for me, the Dark Ages, obviously, I mean, just to sort of try and put some sort of broad definition of it, we're talking like, late ancient, sort of like, you sort of that Romano-British, Arthurian type British, late Roman things, blurring a line into Saxons, Celts, and Picts and things, up through like the Saxons and Normans and Vikings, obviously, and possibly like almost nudging the early medieval period with Crusades and so on in terms of
that's right, the Crusades and stuff,
and the aesthetic of it. Just the look of it, because visual feast, as we mentioned when we were chatting before we kicked off this evening, the visual feast of wargaming is one of the big reasons. And I just like the look of it all, like a Norman helmet and things, or like you're going to go to watch an episode of Last Kingdom to see a bunch of sort of Viking lunatics charging at you with their axes waving and so on, and just the whole visual look of it all is, and also that you can have fun, and also with your style of painting, if you like. I mean, I like, for example, when I do World War II gaming, I like weathering things up to make it look like they've been through the wars and are having to walk and drive through mud and so on. And with the Dark Ages, it's you can do something that looks like it's Vikings raiding through mud and stuff like that, and you can just make it look icky, and that suits my style of painting as well. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that, waffling on at great length, is the aesthetic of the period holds a great deal of interest for me, and that's before I've even started talking about the history of it all. I mean, for example, would you guys say that the history of the period would interest you at all, regardless of whether you actually game it or not?
To a degree, I think. I mean, obviously, when you start a new system, I mean, as sort of far as history goes, I've always been a kind of more of a modern historian rather than an ancient one. Like dating back to when I actually changed courses when I first got to university, because originally I was going to do history, and as soon as I found out it had medieval stuff in it, I changed to modern history ASAP.
Boo! Said the person who's got a degree in classics and ancient and medieval history.
It's all the church part that I just really wanted to avoid. All the various hundreds of different popes and all that sort of stuff. It's like, no, I can't deal with that. I'm going to go modern history. But
whilst we're on the subject of dislike of religion, I'm sure somebody from Northern Ireland might have something to say.
It's not so much a dislike of religion; it's just more of a case of trying to remember all these complicated popes and various dignitaries from the various churches across medieval Europe. Yeah, it's but yeah. I mean, obviously, I did quite a bit of research when I started my very first Saga army, because I've never painted Dark Ages or anything like that before. I wasn't really even into Warhammer. Back in the day when I used to play sort of Games Workshop stuff, really. I think as close to Warhammer as I ever got was probably Blood Bowl. Which is really quite a step away from Warhammer in its own right, even though it's kind of supposed to be set in a sort of similar sort of time period. But yeah, so obviously when I started my saga, my Vikings, I got to admit I did a little more research into the colors of their clothing and the designs of their shields, etc., more so than like reading their history. I've got to admit. And I certainly wouldn't say that I'm an encyclopedia of the Dark Ages, that's for sure.
You see, I think they're all broadly similar, the models for it. Like if you take, for example, imagine a Norman in his chainmail with that style of helmet. Yes, okay, different say shield. For me, I would say that the biggest difference is facial hair and shields.
That's true. Yeah, lots of beards. Yeah,
exactly. Take imagine like a Viking warrior. Then a Norman sort of foot soldier and a Saxon warrior, all broadly similarly kitted out in terms of the style of helmet, the chainmail. But the Vikings like to have shaggy hair and longer and a beard, whereas the Saxon might be like sort of a tash and slightly more.
That's right.
Slightly more trimmed, shall we say? Whereas the Norman's going to be a little bit further along that sort of facial hair trimming scale, really. It's all and different shaped shields. But for me, at a basic, rank and file grunt level, it's very little difference between the models, really.
No, that's right. Yeah,
a Viking with an axe as opposed to a Norman with a spear or a sword or a what have you. But I mean, looking at I don't have them immediately to hand, and I'm not going to go rummaging through lots of stuff in the background here. But if I held up to here's two sprues, just to say they're not Vikings or Normans or whatever sprues, but if I held the Victrix Saxon sprue up alongside the Victrix Norman sprue, there's very little difference.
Sure. I mean, I've got to say that when I was doing when I first started doing Saga, I was kind of I wasn't really open to different miniatures companies at that particular point. I mean, it wasn't until I started enlarging my armies, to get them to that sort of bigger points level, that I actually started to bring in different companies' miniatures. So a lot of my armies are quite big chunked directly from Gripping Beast. No,
I thought.
Actually, you can just about see my Saga armies just on the top of the cupboard there. Those brown boxes.
Oh yeah, those. But what was I going to say? Oh yes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I can see. Yeah, but no, you mentioned Gripping Beast. I've always liked them as a manufacturer, and they do cater very well for Dark Ages. If they've actually got some stuff.
Definitely,
I mean, proof of what my point I was laboriously making just now is the fact that they've got box sets that are just generic Dark Age warriors, Dark Age cavalry, and you can pick that out of there and make, say, a late Goth light cavalryman or a Saxon cavalryman or something like that out of some of these sets they do. Or like you could make Viking archers for the token bit of archers in the back of a Viking army or that sort of thing, really. They do they cater so which sort of is a good segue to say that I think people who are interested in this period are quite well catered for,
definitely.
Particularly in 28mm. and you mentioned gripping beast there. That's a
Yep.
prime example. I mean, Jay, I mean, you do a lot of commission painting. You say you've never painted any Dark Age stuff, but you know quite a few of your club mates do. Do they go with any particular manufacturer and scale? Because you say it's popular with some of your club mates as a period.
Yes, it's very popular. Some of them because loads of them have Gripping Beast. All of the older members, the original members, have the old Gripping Beasts models for all their ancient armies and Dark Age armies and whatever it was. Because I always hear them talking about it, and I think some of it's in storage now because some of the members have left the club or whatever, have donated it to our club now. Because our club's an amalgamation of an older historical club, but it's all different now. But I did do a commission of Vikings in 6mm, and I forever hate Vikings because of 6mm. And having to think that, because I had to do 700 models of 6mm, and it took me about a year to do because I went insane trying to do it.
Well, I bet you did. I bet you did. Now, our esteemed colleague Nick from the Medieval Warrior War Games channel, he persuaded me by offering me 30 pieces of silver, metaphorically speaking, to paint some models for him. 10mm stuff, and yes, this isn't quite Dark Ages. It's Middle Ages, medieval stuff. But yes, I've been painting 10mm stuff, and quite frankly, that's the smallest I'd ever want to go in terms of stuff I'll volunteer to paint and stuff I'd game with. but yeah, going back to what you were saying there, Jay, you say quite a few fans of Gripping Beasts and so on, but what about Victrix? They're very well represented in terms of people whose models I see on the table at my own club, and how popular the manufacturers that come to people's lips quite quickly when talking about this period.
You see, I don't think any of them have Victrix. Most of them don't buy any in Victrix. And most of them would go to Warlord if they were to buy of any company now, because I don't know why most of them don't have internet is the worst part of it, so they can't order the Victrix anywhere, so or they can use their own older models. If they do find something that's usually really obscure and it's through the club itself, and none of them have ever bought Victrix. I think they all hate Victrix after they got the Napoleonic kits, the early ones of the French.
I must admit, my very first experience of Victrix was about 12 years ago, and there was a shop in Weston-super-Mare that is since now become the gaming club I go to, but at the time they were in a different and smaller location, and I picked up a set of the early French infantry, the chaps in bicorns, when they used to come in box sets rather than plastic bag type stuff, like what Victrix stuff does these days. And simply because at the time I was playing 40k, and I thought, I wonder if it would be cool to convert Imperial Guard to, like, look like French guards with these. You just use bits, and boy was I wrong, simply because these things were small and freaking fiddly, and just quite frankly, it put me off Victrix. But fast forward a few years, and I know several people speak quite highly of some of their later kits. I assembled or helped a friend assemble a young lad who was just getting into Napoleonics at my club, the British artillery, and that they all went together quite nicely. I know Martin's seventh son speaks quite highly of the British Victrix Napoleonics kit. But
I had that as well when I first started as well. It was an alright kit. I don't think I ever built it, to be fair. I think it's sitting somewhere.
Fair enough. But having digressed away from our chosen topic, the Dark Ages stuff, I have first-hand experience, and all I can say is they are the at a complete opposite end of the wow, isn't this a nice kit scale from those very first French Victrix things I did. The Vikings I brought. Brilliant, wonderful kit to put together. The Saxons, which I just ordered one sprue of, just simply because I wanted to have a, should I get some of these as well, sort of thing. And it's equally good, almost freaking identical, apart from a few bits and pieces on it. But yeah, they're brilliant, and they're Normans everybody raves about. So I'm quite surprised to hear you say, Jay, that if the period is popular with some of your club mates, that Victrix as a manufacturer aren't.
Yeah, it's most of the members are very inactive now because our club is mainly 40k. Because there used to be a historical club completely that was based in one of the schools in Oma, and they had a club there, and loads of members left before COVID or after COVID, and they dispersed because most of them aren't even from the same area. Most of them are actually from the Republic. They are around the border area. They're all from Donegal, Monaghan, Cavan, so it takes them a while to get up there. And Oma was much handier because it's less back roads and more main roads, but we're located in a fairly secluded area outside my town, which is just back roads you go through, and it's not a very pleasant place to drive to. And we lost most of the members there, and they probably could have Victrix. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, that's a whole discussion topic, wargamers or not wargamers in itself, isn't it? How COVID impacted on, clubs and pastimes, which clearly is a bit of a first world problem compared to more urgent things. But I know, for example, being quite active with my local rugby club. I no longer play because I'm fat, old, and unfit. But not that stops a few of my friends that still do play. But it's just membership of things like that is dropping. And my dad's quite well to do with the management of his local cricket club, for example, and it's all suffered for similar reasons, really. But people moving away or difficult to get to, so it's a shame, really. But coming back to models though and manufacturers, I mean, first-hand experience for me is Victrix are very good, and I heartily agree with the Gripping Beast that was mentioned earlier on. Actually, that sprue I wafted up as an example. Actually, this is a Gripping Beast sprue, but Goth cavalry. I want to do a mostly, if not all, cavalry ancients army, so that the Ostrogoths are of his choice. From my knowledge of manufacturers, the first two names that would spring to mind for this period are Victrix and Gripping Beast, in that order, I would say. The first army for this period I ever owned was an old metal Norman army from Gripping Beasts about 20 years ago, and they were lovely models. But they're quite well catered for as a period, I think, because there's a lot of stuff from Warlord and so on. And these days, back in my day, being 51 years old, but when I was a younger fella like Jay, 15 mil was all the rage, with 28 mil, 25 mil being one of those. It's nice, but it's niche until things started being available in plastic a lot more. But so what about 15 mil? Actually, do either of you two know much about 15 mil for this particular period?
Not for Dark Ages. Certainly not. The only 15 mil I really have dabbled in is Flames of War and Team Yankee. Really.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I mean, in my first coming as a war gamer, I was mostly a 15 mil Ancients player, but there's a few out there, but I'm not as well versed in it as I am 28s, 25s, 28s, whatever you want to call them. Essex, for example, they've got a good range, and the people that run the company are very affable. I interviewed them for a podcast once years ago. Very pleasant people indeed, actually.
I can imagine it being quite a good scale, because you can build up the real proper mobs, good mob-sized army, out of 15 mil, where you can't really quite do that because of space with 28s.
I had a Middle Imperial Roman army, and the Essex used to sell these ready-made army boxes and so on, and I think I brought 2 of them, and plus a couple of extra bits and pieces to make up a few units, and it looked quite splendid on the tabletop, if I say so myself.
Yeah.
I'm just negotiating with my daughter. She's just been to the shop and getting the change. Marvelous. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Anyway, chocolate, Mum. But but 15 mil, it's almost gone out of fashion, hasn't it? Really, but apart from things like Flames of War, in fact,
I think there are systems that still use it, aren't there? I think is it the Plastic Soldier Company do some sort of game that uses 15 mil.
Yeah, and in fact, Plastic Soldier Company are brilliant in terms of their models and stuff. If you're into World War II gaming, either 15 or 20 mil, it's very good.
Yeah, I've dabbled in some of their 15 mil stuff. It's it's good actually. Yeah, I've even picked up some of their 15 mil sort of Cold War era stuff as well. It's really good. I think I brought like a one sprue of like an M60 just to give it a try. Because I've just picked up the Team Yankee new starter set that comes with 3 T60s or M60s, sorry. And I thought, well, I'll just get a Plastic Soldier Company one just to see what it looks like, size comparison and all that sort of stuff. And although I would say it's not quite as good as the Battlefront ones, it's perfectly good for scale. And then the other thing that I picked up was, of course, the Russian infantry, and that is a really good set. Their Cold War Soviet infantry set is amazing. It's
15 mil infantry for World War II stuff. It, like I say, does nothing for me really. Yet somebody who, like me, back when I was your age, Jay, it was Ancients and Napoleonics. I loved it in 15 mil. But so you say now, is that because you disagree what I said about the infantry at that scale?
No, I hate the infantry. I bought the Desert Rats box set from Flames of War, and I don't like the infantry in it. I can't stand it. Like, it's heresy saying that, because place I bought it from, they love it. They have an entire league about it. I will be shot next time we go into that club.
Eccentric Man in the chat just mentioned Plastic Soldier Company figures for Mortal McGlorium Ancients.
That's it. Yeah.
That's it. Yeah, I was struggling to remember the name of the rule set, but I mean,
I think a lot of people abbreviate it as Meg, don't they? I think.
That's it. That's it. Now, we are straying a little from the sort of Dark Ages topic, but it's
still
relevant to use as an example. But like I say, for me, I think 15 mil, in my experience and my knowledge of people that are, as a broad brush across all of wargaming, rather than, because obviously Flames of War very popular, blah blah blah. But it's not as popular as it was. But there's plenty out there if you know where to look. And my first ports of call, if you were interested in this period for 15 mil, would definitely be Essex, and but after that, then just. Not bad shout at all. Museum miniatures, maybe, I'm not certain, but their ranges are like. I know them Napoleonics are quite good, but I don't know what their Ancients and more Dark Ages stuff is like. But Old Glory, of course.
Yes,
very good, very competitively price wise, actually. Old Glory, actually. No, I wasn't keen on the Napoleonics of those I tried, but yes, so going back to 28s then, and or going back to any scale, to be fair, with 28s being so popular for models and so on, besides the skirmish gaming things we mentioned earlier, like Saga, SPQR, and so on, thinking bigger, what rule sets are the first ones that spring to mind? For me, it's Hail Caesar, because I play at a club where it's very Warlord game centric, and it's a system I like. It's simple, it flows, it's quite intuitive. But what about yourself, Anthony? So you aware of any other sort of bigger?
I would say Hail Caesar as well. Although I don't think I would go for Dark Ages playing that. I think I'd go a little bit later, and maybe even quite a bit later. My sort of interest in that sort of is not so much Dark Age, but maybe sort of from the Romans going up to maybe sort of the Wars of the Roses. I'd probably be more inclined to head towards, rather than the idea of actually having to build big armies up of Dark Age figures. I mean, I did enjoy building up my Saga armies, and I did enjoy painting them, but it was a whole new painting experience for me. I remember at one point, when you first start a new project, you're always a bit wary about painting figures, aren't you? What colours do I use, etc., etc. And then in the end, I just basically said, right, I basically found out which colours were available at the time, just lined them all up in front of me, and then I just picked 3 random ones, and then I just paint a whole unit of various bits of clothing, all these various colours, and it seemed to work really quite well. And I think all for the shields and stuff, I hand painted practically all my shields. I only had like one. In fact, actually, for all my Saga armies, I basically only had one pack of little big man shields, one pack of transfers per army of Saga. So, like, practically all my shields are all hand painted. I got to say, watching Vikings was quite inspirational for shield designs for Vikings.
Yes, I've not Vikings. I've not. It's one of those things that's very popular, but I've not actually seen it. I mean, for example, I've only recently watched Game of Thrones. That's how behind I am, and I can't see why I wasn't watching it before. It's fucking brilliant. But I digress. But yeah, Last King for me, in terms of TV shows and fiction and so on, that sort of relate to this period. It's really good. Even the missus likes it. They're probably for different reasons than me. I don't know.
I think I watched it when it was on BBC Two. Was that the first series?
I'm not certain, 'cause I know the current series that's just come onto Netflix it's going to be the last one, and then they're going to do a film, and then that's it.
I think they only had one series on the BBC, and then it went to Netflix. And I think it's supposed to have got better since it moved to Netflix. I gotta say, I mean, I quite enjoyed it, but it didn't sort of like. I think I probably enjoyed Vikings more, but then again, the trouble with the Vikings is, I think there's six series, or maybe possibly 7, because I think they split the last one into 2. And I would say probably from like maybe the 4th series, it started to go a bit odd. I didn't enjoy it as much as like the first 4 series. But it was basically, I think it was basically on the History Channel, and that's basically where I watched it all. But definitely the first 3 or 4 seasons were very inspirational, and I suppose the first sort of couple, possibly the third, but was around the sort of period when I was doing my Vikings. So it was quite handy to give you some ideas on their sort of because that's when I added a few shield maidens to my Viking army.
Fair enough.
Stuff like that, yeah.
Okie dokie. Yeah. Well, like I say, going back to rule sets then, definitely Hail Caesar for me. But what about, I mean, a couple of months ago we had Simon Miller who wrote To the Strongest on. Now, that's obviously a lot of medieval stuff now, but that could cater for Dark Ages, I would have thought. Do you think?
Well, I can't say that I've had a massive amount of experience with it, but again, I think most things that go into sort of medieval periods could probably double up quite easily to earlier periods. The weapons are basically the same, aren't they?
Well, pretty much so, yeah.
I mean, take away things like possibly like gunpowder and stuff, but I mean, I suppose you could say that the crossbows kind of come into the first version of Saga, even though they're probably a little bit later. Because I think the Normans have got crossbows, haven't they? In the original Saga, nobody else did. But I'm pretty sure the Normans
you often associate with them.
Yeah.
So what, Jay, you say it's popular as a period amongst your clubmates. What rule sets have they used?
I think they use Hail Caesar as what they used to use, was what they use now. I have no idea what they used to use because they didn't rarely ever play it because I wasn't part of the club then. But I did look up here Griffin Beast's Dark Age Irish, and I'd love to point out that the Irish have not changed for 700 years by this point, because they wear the same stuff as they did in the start of the 17th century. So that shows you the progression in Ireland for that time period.
We've actually got a Saga Irish army.
They progress. You can use it until the 17th century, so you'll be fine. It's really strange because my figures look more regressed than the actual Griffin Beast box art, which is sort of worrying because they should be more advanced. But it's life.
In the chat here, I'm just looking at the chat and what have you, and much like when we are talking about bigger battles, we keep coming back to Hail Caesar, and I apologize, folks, if anybody's watching this, for my ignorance regarding other sets for larger battles that cover this period, and I specifically emphasize larger battles. But Lion Rampant keeps getting mentioned, and so that makes me think that there's that period, that game, the Baron's War, which is like very early medieval stuff. I wonder whether that might do a job for Dark Ages gaming as well. There's got to be some like Dark Ages specific things out there that focus on, say, things like Vikings. That I'm just a ignorant bug and I don't know very much about it. I had hoped, for example, Stig, who's big into his late Romans and that sort of period thing, might have been on tonight, but he hasn't been able to join us, sadly. So we're a little lacking in there. I've actually played this period a lot, and here's what I think of it. Some knowledge here. So apologies for those watching.
I mean, I suppose. I mean, I don't really know of that many. I mean, I'm sure. I mean, obviously the ones that we've mentioned, but I can't say that any others than what have already been mentioned sort of come to mind, really. Especially, I mean, not that I can say that I'm, like I say, I'm not in any way an expert of Dark Age gaming. But I think for me, Saga was a good introduction to sort of Dark Age gaming. But like I say, it didn't. I don't think I could see myself, like, for instance, upscaling it to like a Hail Caesar army, for instance.
Whereas you see that sort of thing can be possible with some gaming sets when the rules are relatively related to each other. Like a friend of mine is just building up his SPQR collection to play Hail Caesar.
Yeah.
But like I say, somebody just going back to the subject of models, a manufacturer who I'm a big fan of, and I had actually forgotten about, is the comment I just put on the screen now, the Eccentric Man. Footsore are now doing some great figures for Dark Ages and medieval periods. Very true. Great manufacturer, Footsore. And also, if I chuck another thing into the mix, Fireforge Games. That Dare's Vault stuff, which is lots of early medieval things, and there's a lot of fantasy and stuff in there as well. But there's a lot of things in there you can use for Dark Ages gaming, and there's some really nice models amongst that.
Foundry do some really nice figures too.
I love their Normans. I've got quite a few.
Yeah, I mean, I think I got like maybe 2 or 3 packs of their Anglo-Saxons, and they're like every one's like a character. And because when I built my sort of Saga armies up, when I first built them, I just built them. But when I started expanding them, I started to put like narratives into all the units. So there's like all sorts of different characters and little backstories to them, all this sort of stuff. And I found those really quite. And I think I picked up some of their Vikings as well.
Well, actually, I was looking for these earlier on. I couldn't remember which little drawer I put them in. Here's some of my Victrix Vikings.
Oh, yeah, unfortunately, the Victrix Vikings weren't around when I was doing mine. In fact, I don't think I even heard of Victrix at that particular point.
Plastic Gripping Beast Norman.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Well, easily at hand, I have a bunch of unpainted Gripping Beasts. So from my... so there's from what are these guys? The Temple of Solomon Templars. The Millite's Christie army, these guys are going to be for. And then I have a box of, I think these are Millite's Christie Sergeants in here.
Yes, now Dare's Vault, the Fireforge Games I just mentioned, they do foot and mounted sergeants that could also potentially be used. Now, looking at the chat again, Wieland Schmieder said, Perry also has some nice knights and infantry for the First Crusade. It's a bit late for Dark Ages, but they can also be used as Normans. Yes, they can indeed, and they are lovely models. A friend of mine has a large army composed of almost entirely of models from that Perry's Crusader range, and they're really nice. Really nice, typical Perry stuff, really. You know what you get. It's good quality, good price, and and very historically accurate as well. So it's very good. That very good. Any other? Let me just have a quick look at the chat. My mentioning of Baron's War was picked up, saying not sure about Baron's War, but I've got the rules, but not read it yet. Says Eccentric Man. And that's it so far for the chat. So there's been a few ideas there in terms of manufacturers, but just trying to think of anything else that springs to mind. So when we say Dark Ages, I mean, Jay, for you, what does that cover in terms of the armies involved and the period?
Ireland. That's everything. But no, well, I read a book on the Holy Roman Empire, and that's put me off the entirety of the subject, because I read it and I read about the Pope, and then I decided, why am I reading this? And I read it for over 600 pages and regretted the entirety of it all. So all I focus on is Ireland at the moment, and that because it's quite an interesting period for Ireland because they've done nothing, and which is what they usually do. But anyway, that's really all it is for me. It was ruined by one book that was 600 pages long. Wasted my life on it, and that's all.
How about yourself, Anthony?
I'll probably say, I mean, I don't know if people have played, do you remember there was the Total War series when they did their?
Yeah.
What was it? Can't think
Saga?
of what. No, Total War on PC.
War Saga, was it not?
The one that included the sort of Dark Age armies.
I can't think of the
name offhand. There was an earlier one, and then there's a later one, isn't there? I think it was Atella was the later one. And they brought out some expansions for it. But the original one, I can't. Do you think I can think of the name of it? But that was kind of like, I suppose that was my first sort of introductions into sort of gaming of sort into sort of Dark Ages. And like I say, that was kind of before I sort of got back into wargaming really. But to me, I suppose the first thing that jumps to mind is things like, you know, the Anglo-Saxons, the Vikings, the Scottish, the Welsh, I suppose Normans as well. Basically all the sort of the basic races that were all the basic types that were available when I started Saga.
It's Friends of Britannia, Total War Friends of Britannia, is it not?
That's the one. Yeah.
Because I had it saved. I love that too. I forgot I even played that game until you mentioned it.
Now, that's for me. I would say it covers once you go past the blurred lines between late Roman, Arthurian, sub-Roman, and all the way up until, like, say, Norman conquest and blurred lines into early medieval Barons' War. That's the period I would say it covers for me, and thus my comments about a lot of the big armies from that period all look very similar, you know, Saxons, Normans, Vikings, and so on. So from an aesthetics point of view, I really like it. From you think about the fiction and so on set in the period, I really like it, and I love the models and that. And I think if I was to sort of, you know, make a judgment call, I'd say it lends itself well to smaller narrative gaming. Yes, there were big pitched battles and things like Hastings and what have you, but for me it lends itself well to the smaller narrative gaming. And as somebody's just said in the chat, it's a catch-all designation, probably a period of about 900 years. That's very true. But in terms of like sort of the headlines, if you like, that's what the way I just described it is what I see, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Okie doke. Well, I think that the discussion is now going round and round in circles a little slightly. So unless anybody's got anything else to add on this subject, shall we look to bring this to a conclusion, gents?
Could do. Or we could just slightly change the subject.
Well, let's try. I think it's always best if prepared early, and sadly, a lot of the things that were prepared early were by people who are suddenly at the last minute no longer able to join us.
Yeah, we're left with the substitutes.
Yeah, but you're left with somebody who's keen to know more about the thing but doesn't know much about it and just likes the aesthetics, i.e. me, yourself who's played Saga, and Jay whose mates have played it but he's not that interested himself.
That's right.
So all a bit unfortunate, really. But at the end of the day, I think it's a period that offers a lot of opportunities from a modelling point of view.
Yeah.
Fiction, both in films and TV and books, to be inspired by model ranges. I'm a little dubious about 15 mil for the smaller narrative games that I've described. But I think if you're into 28 mil and you're into the skirmish or smaller, bigger games, if you know what I mean.
And you can build some really good themed armies, you know, with lots of characters and personalities and stuff, and to customize your force, you know, to make it look a little bit better than just like, you know, hordes and hordes of similarly painted troops. Because you've got a smaller number of figures, you can actually spend time cutting out your units to make them a lot more individual sort of thing, which I think always adds to a game. When there's lots of backstories and stuff with various characters. Yeah.
Indeed. Well, thank you very much for taking part today then, gents. I appreciate the time. I hope people who watched have found it, you know, if they're interested in the period, they found it interesting. You know, we've got a Discord, we've got Facebook page and so on. So come along and let us know what you'd like us to talk about, and or any comments on the content that we've spoken about this evening, and maybe we can come back to it and revisit it at some stage. So cheers for taking part, chaps, and speak to you again soon.